Psalm 68, verse 5, extol him who rides the clouds, Yahweh is his name. Here's what's jarring about that verse. Rider of the clouds was Baal's official title in Canaanite religion. The biblical writer seems to say, yes, there's a cloud rider, but his name is Yahweh, not Baal. Why would biblical writers use their rival god's language to describe their own god, and what did they change in the process? This matters because storm god imagery saturates the Hebrew Bible, Psalms, prophets, even Genesis. Understanding where this language came from and how Israel transformed it reveals one of the most distinctive theological moves in ancient religion. We'll trace the borrowed imagery, map its spread across the ancient world, and then uncover the crucial divergence that made Israel's version fundamentally different. The answer lies not in what they borrowed, but in what they changed. And so that's it. Let's establish what storm god imagery looks like. In Ugaritic texts, ancient documents from Canaan, Baal rides the clouds, commands thunder, and defeats Prince Si, a divine rival named Yam. Through this victory, Baal becomes king of the gods. The pattern is consistent. Storm god defeats watery chaos to establish cosmic order. Now look at the Hebrew Bible. Psalm 29, Yahweh's voice thunders over the waters. Psalm 74, God smashes the heads of sea monsters. Judges 5, the earth trembles, clouds pour water when Yahweh marches forth. The parallels aren't subtle, same imagery, same language, same cosmic drama. Biblical writers knew exactly whose vocabulary they were using. This wasn't just happening in Canaan. Across the ancient Near East, a religious revolution unfolded between 1500 and 1200 BCE. In Mesopotamia, Marduk defeats Tiamat, the primordial sea dragon. By blasting wind into her mouth, he becomes king of gods, replacing the older sky god Anu. In India, the storm god Indra replaces the sky god Dyaus. In Greece, Zeus overthrows Kronos. The pattern repeats everywhere. Young storm god defeats water or chaos, then replaces the older sky god. This happened across multiple cultures during the exact period when Israel emerged as a people. The timing matters. Ugaritic texts describing Baal were composed between 1400 and 1200 BCE. The traditional Exodus date falls around 1250 BCE. Israel emerges in Canaan around 1200 BCE. Israel didn't develop in isolation. They emerged during a period of intense religious change, surrounded by cultures telling storm god stories. They heard these narratives. They knew these images. The question isn't whether Israel borrowed. The textual parallels make that clear. The question is what they did with the borrowed material. That's where the theological innovation happens. Here's the crucial divergence. In Canaanite myths, Baal fights Prince Si, Yam, a divine rival. The battle is cosmic. It recurs cyclically. Two gods clash for supremacy over the universe. In Exodus, Yahweh fights Pharaoh, a human enemy. The battle is historical. It happens once. God acts in a specific time and place to deliver a specific people. Notice what changed. The sea isn't Yahweh's opponent. The sea is Yahweh's weapon. He deploys it against Egypt's army. Baal struggles against the sea as an enemy to be conquered. Yahweh commands the sea as a tool to be wielded. Same imagery, radically different theology. This transformation appears in the Hebrew word for deep, Tihom. Is cognate with Tiamat, the Babylonian chaos dragon Marduk defeats. In Genesis 1, God's Ruach, wind, breath, spirit, moves over the Tehom, the deep. Then God's word separates the waters. Dry land appears. Creation emerges. In Exodus 14, God's Ruach, the same word, blows over the Red Sea. Waters part, dry land appears, Israel walks through. Same pattern, divine wind, parted waters, something new emerges. In Genesis, a cosmos. In Exodus, a nation. The storm god imagery serves historical creation, not mythic combat. Israel borrowed the language but rejected the worldview. In Canaanite religion, Baal is the storm. Lightning is his weapon because he is a nature deity. His power is the power of weather itself. Yahweh transcends nature. He uses storms without being a storm. He commands waters without being a water god. The imagery is metaphorical, not ontological. When Psalm 29 describes Yahweh's voice as thunder, it's not identifying God with weather, it's using familiar imagery to describe power that exceeds any natural phenomenon. A common misconception: the Israelites just copied Canaanite religion. Borrowing language isn't borrowing theology. Every culture adapts existing imagery. What matters is the transformation. Israel took mythic patterns, storm god defeats chaos, and historicized them. The cosmic battle becomes a one-time event. The divine rival becomes a human tyrant. The recurring cycle becomes linear history moving toward a purpose. This isn't copying. This is theological innovation using familiar vocabulary. The biblical writers weren't naive. They knew whose language they used, and they chose it deliberately to make a claim. Whatever Baal supposedly does, Yahweh actually does in history. Then another misconception: storm god language means Yahweh was originally a nature deity. The texts themselves argue against this. Yahweh creates nature in Genesis 1. He controls nature in Exodus. He judges through nature in the prophets. At every point, he stands outside what he commands. Nature deities depend on natural cycles. They wax and wane with seasons. Baal dies and rises annually in Canaanite myths. Yahweh never dies. He doesn't depend on cycles. He initiates history and guides it toward ends he determines. What does this mean for reading the Bible? When you encounter storm imagery in Psalms or prophets, you're hearing echoes of an ancient cultural conversation. The writers engaged their world, not escaped it. This doesn't undermine the Bible's uniqueness. It highlights Israel's distinctive contribution. Every culture borrows and adapts. The question is always, what did they do with the material? Israel's transformation of mythic pattern into historical narrative is itself the innovation. They took stories about gods fighting gods and told stories about God acting for people in real time, in real places, with real consequences. Here's a practical approach when reading ancient texts. Ask two questions. What's being borrowed? What's being changed? Psalm 68 borrows rider of the clouds. It changes the name, Yahweh, not Baal. It changes the context, leading Israel through the wilderness, not battling divine rivals. Exodus 15 borrows the victory over sea pattern. It changes the enemy, Pharaoh's army, not a chaos monster. It changes the outcome, national liberation, not cosmic enthronement. The borrowed elements connect Israel to its world, and the changed elements reveal what Israel believed differently. Both matter for understanding the text. The most powerful theological statements often come not from inventing new language, but from taking familiar language and filling it with new meaning. Israel's neighbors told stories of storm gods battling chaos. Israel told stories of one God acting in history, using the same imagery to make a different claim. The clouds remained, the thunder remained, the parted waters remained, but the meaning transformed. That transformation is where Israel's distinctive voice emerges.